The story begins on March 18, 1984, with a Japanese man named Kahatsu Izaki. He was at home, enjoying an evening bath when suddenly two masked and armed individuals invaded, kidnapping him while he was completely naked. Izaki, the owner of a well-known confectionery factory in Japan called Glico, arrived at his factory the next day and received a ransom message. The criminals demanded 1 billion Japanese yen and 100 kilograms of gold, equivalent to $10 million. They instructed him that the ransom exchange would take place at a public telephone booth on the street, and they would specify its location. However, 2 days later, just before paying any part of the ransom, Izaki managed to escape from his captors before dawn, unnoticed. He successfully untied the ropes that bound him, broke the door of the warehouse where he was held captive, and fled. Contrary to initial impressions, he wasn't naked because they provided him with clothes after kidnapping him. He ran far from the scene until he encountered two railroad workers who assisted him in contacting the police. The problem was that Izaki couldn't identify his kidnappers or provide any details about their appearance. Despite the failed kidnapping attempt, the perpetrators persisted and sent a threatening message to Izaki and his factory. The message stated that if they didn't pay $4,080,000, they would poison the sweets produced by the factory with cyanide. And to confirm their intentions and assure everyone that they were indeed capable of carrying it out, they infiltrated the factory and set fire to parts of it. This made everyone certain that they were serious. What they did next instilled terror throughout the entire Japanese population. They forced the Japanese police to deploy over 1,000 officers and utilize more than 100 deaths to apprehend them. For those who are hearing me for the first time, subscribe to the Ask Reddit channel. I share a true story every week. Today, I will tell you about the case where the entire Japanese population collaborated with the police to solve it. But the criminal was smarter than everyone. The police didn't know whom to blame, and they weren't suspicious of anyone specific. In the 1980s, having a case like this baffling them was extremely rare because the numbers showed that the Japanese police were the strongest in the world. In 1983, they were able to solve 97% of murder cases and 55% of robbery cases. However, the failure to solve the Glico case in the 80s was a dark spot in their history, damaging their reputation. It was such an anomaly that a renowned Japanese newspaper called Yomiuri published a comprehensive article on the front page, stating that they couldn't recall a case in Japan's history where criminals mocked the police to such an extent. What challenged the police even further in front of the public was that the criminals openly dared the police, and for more than a year and a half, they sent over 100 messages. These messages mocked the police and challenged them, asserting that they knew how to catch them. They provided the police with information and hints but remained elusive. The first message was addressed to the foolish police, questioning their intelligence. It taunted them, suggesting that if they were true professionals, they would have caught the criminals. However, because they were incompetent, the criminals would provide some hints. The hints included suggestions about who the criminal might be, such as someone inside the factory or the owners of the warehouse Izaki managed to escape from. The person who wrote the message to the police also gave them information about the gray-colored car used in Izaki's kidnapping. They even provided the address of the supermarket where they bought food after the kidnapping. In the concluding part of the message, it was written that if, after all this information, the police couldn't catch them, then they were nothing more than thieves stealing people's tax money. The criminals even threatened to kidnap the chief of police of the province. After this message, the criminals wiped the floor with the police. Numerous messages started reaching newspapers and media outlets. The criminals had a talent for grabbing people's attention in a shocking way. They sent messages to the press and media to ensure that their threats spread widely. The entire story became a sensation in Japan, with everyone following it like a movie. The messages they sent contained random information, and none of it proved useful to the police. This situation put the police in a humiliating position in front of the public. To be fair, the police were working relentlessly on the case, but the criminals were anything but ordinary. The police were unable to track them down in any way. The only clue they managed to gather from all the messages was the distinctive dialect used by the criminals. It resembled the way people in Osaka City spoke. The people of this city had a unique way of expressing themselves. Despite the deep significance of this observation, it didn't lead them to any useful information. After the first 3 months of the case, the mysterious figure who sent the messages started referring to himself as the man with 20 faces. Things remained as they were until September of 1984, when another confectionery factory named Morinaga started receiving threatening messages. The messages demanded a payment of $410,000, warning of dire consequences if the demand wasn't met. Morinaga chose not to respond to the criminals or send them any money. After several days of silence in the Japanese newspapers, the criminals sent the following message. To all mothers in Japan in the fall, when your appetite is open, the sweets will be very delicious. Surely when we talk about sweets, the first thing that comes to your mind is Morinaga sweets. Tonight, we have added a special and new taste, potassium cyanide. It has a slightly bitter taste, but at least it won't cause tooth decay in your children. We have placed warning labels on the boxes, and there are 20 boxes in stores, including some in Tokyo. Indeed, on the same day, store owners across Japan found boxes labeled with warnings about cyanide. 18 of these boxes were discovered on that day, one of them at a supermarket around 30 meters from Izaki's house, the owner of the first kidnapped factory. Although they didn't find all the boxes containing poison, no one reported finding them, and no one was harmed. Following this incident, another message arrived stating that the next time there would be 30 boxes with poison, and they wouldn't put warning labels on them. In the 2 weeks that followed this message, more than 40,000 police officers were deployed to monitor supermarkets throughout Japan. What did they gain from the surveillance operations? Nothing. No one could determine whether the criminals had actually carried out their threats or produced more poison boxes or not. However, investigators found footage from a surveillance camera at one of the stores where they discovered a poison box for the first time. In the video, a person with curly hair wearing glasses and a baseball cap was seen placing something on the shelf where they found the poison box. Unfortunately, the camera recording quality was very poor, making it impossible to identify the person. Nevertheless, the police released the footage to the public, hoping someone might recognize him based on any distinguishing details. Despite their efforts, they couldn't determine his identity. In addition to the video recording, the police also released recordings of the extortion and threatening calls that were reaching the peculiar factory, which frightened people even more. The voice in the calls, making threats and demanding money, did not belong to a gang member, nor did it match the mysterious man with 20 faces. The voice belonged to a boy, a child. In one of the calls, a young boy was giving instructions to the factory, directing them to leave a bag with money behind a bus station seat. The recordings, when released to the public, didn't provide any useful information, but rather intensified the curiosity and concern among the people. The mystery continued until March of 1985, a full year after the first incident with Izaki's kidnapping. By this time, around 30 food companies, including confectionery factories, had experienced harassment. And receiving their threats, the Japanese police, their investigators, and all their security agencies don't know what to do. Imagine that in factories and companies, they responded to the criminal's demands, and indeed, they prepared the money and placed it in the location he asked them to leave it. However, despite that, none of the threats that came to the Glico factory took effect. The criminal asked the factory to send employees to a public telephone at a waiting station on the street and wait for a call. Indeed, 2 police officers went there, dressed in civilian clothes, appearing to be employees of the factory, but he didn't call. The next day, he sent them a message saying, "Do you think you are smart and can fool me? I sent 2 police officers dressed in blue suits, pretending to be factory employees. You could easily recognize them from their eyes because they showed the cunning of the police in every step they took." The criminal was always one step ahead of them, and what drove the police and everyone crazy is that this criminal, or criminals, had not taken a single dollar until then. On August 12, 1985, about a year and a half after kidnapping Izaki, the mysterious man with 20 faces sent his final message, announcing that he would stop. At that time, news came out that the Japanese National Police and the media received more than 28,000 messages from the criminals during the year and a half that passed. The police used more than 130,000 officers in this case. The police were truly humiliated and exposed in front of the people after everyone knew this information. I mean, you received 28,000 messages, all of them containing hints about who the criminals might be, and you used 130,000 officers, yet you couldn't figure out who they were. At that time, the police had to present their conclusions to the people and complain about whom they had worked with during this period. Show the people how you will figure out who the criminal is if you can. The first analysis is that the issue might be internal, and the culprit could be someone from within the Glico factory. Katsuhisa Izaki is implicated in the matter. Initially, everyone suspected him at the beginning of the crime wave against food factories. People couldn't understand how Izaki managed to escape from the ropes and flee from the warehouse where he was confined. They were saying, "Listen, Izaki got kidnapped and managed to escape, and his factory received only a threat." However, Morinaga's factory did get poisoned sweets. They were not just threatened, but also affected severely. Products were withdrawn from the shelves of all stores, and the factory temporarily closed, leading to the layoff of 2/3 of the employees. Accusing the factory owner of being the criminal is impossible because no one would destroy their own business in such a way. The man ultimately closed his factory for a period, and the business was destroyed, resulting in 2/3 of the employees losing their jobs. It's impossible for him to be the culprit. The second theory is that the criminal or criminals wanted to take revenge on food factories. About 30 years ago, specifically in 1955, an incident occurred in a dry milk factory where arsenic accidentally entered the milk production line. Subsequently, more than 12,000 infants became ill, and 183 died. Guess which factory this was? Morinaga. The factory then reached an agreement with the families of the affected children, and their satisfaction was achieved. However, after 14 years, a report revealed that the surviving children still suffered physical damage. When the threats began against the factories, the police thought, why not consider those children who have now grown up to be 30 years old and may be the ones doing this? When they were young, they suffered from food factories and got poisoned from the milk. Now that they have grown up, they want revenge. However, when the police considered this possibility, they questioned why these individuals would attack all the factories. Their problem seemed to be specifically with the Morinaga factory, so why target all factories? The third and final theory suggests that a person named Manabu Maya Zaki is the criminal responsible for all these incidents. In 1984, at the beginning of the threat wave on factories, a criminal demanded 100 million Japanese yen at a specific location from one of the factories. The factory responded, and they went to deliver the money, but they were actually informants for the police. When the police spotted someone at the drop-off location, he fled from them, and they couldn't catch him. They attempted to sketch his features based on the police's description, and the drawing remarkably resembled a man named Manabu Maya Zaki. The police even brought his mother, and when shown the sketch, she recognized her son. Manabu Maya Zaki turned out to be the son of a prominent Yakuza leader, and had previous legal issues with the government. However, they couldn't charge or prove anything against him due to a lack of evidence. The crucial point for the police was to show people how extensively they worked on the case, even going back 30 years to the milk poisoning incident, and creating an accurate sketch. They left the decision to the public to determine who the criminal might be. In a surprising twist, Manabu Maya Zaki wrote a book detailing all the crimes he committed throughout his life. The book was published right after the mysterious man with 20 faces case was closed, and the cover featured the police sketch. The book became a massive success, generating profits of 100 million yen. So, if Manabu Maya Zaki was indeed the criminal, he managed to acquire the 100 million in a different way, mocking the police. Now, people are left to decide whether it was the individuals poisoned as children seeking revenge or if Manabu Maya Zaki orchestrated the crimes without any concrete evidence against him, making him the most notorious police thwarter on earth. Feel free to share your opinions on who the criminal might be, The individual seeking revenge, or Manabu Maya Zaki. The police have no concrete evidence against him if he is the criminal. That concludes our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this type of content, make sure to watch the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video.